Hi, my name is Alexis. I have maladaptive daydreaming disorder, and I don't know how to do intros to videos, even though I should probably learn soon. Anyway, the other day I was filming a Q&A kind of video with another maladaptive daydreamer, and we got into talking about how the media often oversimplifies or just doesn't completely understand maladaptive daydreaming, which can be frustrating if you're trying to find materials to show someone who maybe doesn't take you seriously, or even just when you've found out the term and are trying to get more information. So I wanted to react to this animation video I'd found describing maladaptive daydreaming, and kind of correct, almost, not quite. I wouldn't say it's full out wrong, but add on to maybe some of the points they missed.
What is maladaptive daydreaming? Have you ever sat through a boring class only to find yourself drifting into a daydream? Maybe you've dreamt about laying in paradise minutes before checking out of a shift.
So I'm going to stop it right there immediately. At least for me and most people I've talked to, maladaptive daydreaming doesn't happen when you are in public nearly as often as it happens when you're alone. It's this like, you've been in a boring class, it's really hard not to daydream. Yes, but also no, because it's not the same kind of daydreaming. When maladaptive daydreamers daydream, they act out subconsciously. It's really hard not to. And most often, there will be a repetitive movement of some sort. I think the most common ones I've heard are pacing and things like that, which you can't do in a classroom setting. So the kind of daydreaming that maladaptive daydreaming is concerned with is not the kind of daydreaming that happens because you're bored in class. And, what else? What did they say there? That, right. Maybe you've dreamt about laying in paradise. Again, maladaptive daydreaming, more often than not, is not about idealistic situations that we wish we were in more. Oftentimes, maladaptive daydreams can actually be quite upsetting to the daydreamer, and we often don't have at least full control over what happens in them. I've always described it, it's more like watching a movie or being part of a game. You might have some control, like with a game, over what's happening, but for the most part, you're either acting a part of it or just observing.
In most cases, we daydream when we wish to be elsewhere, but can't change the current setting or situation just yet. It sounds harmless, creative, and fun, right? But too much of anything is always bad for you.
And again, I'd just like to reiterate this, too much of anything can be bad for you. The nature of the daydreams is different than the average nature of someone who doesn't have maladaptive daydreams. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because I have seen online a lot of people that they're a bit absent-minded, or they get distracted easily, and they'll hear about this maladaptive daydreaming term and they'll see people talking about it and they'll assume that they have it because of that. And then it leads to this whole back and forth fight that I've seen a lot of people have online, that I was part of once upon a time, where some people believe it's just a good thing, that nothing bad comes of maladaptive daydreaming, that it can never get in the way of your life because, it's just daydreaming and you can just stop. And it's not. It's addictive, it can be upsetting, it is compulsive, the pacing, the repetitive movements are compulsive. And it's just generally different than normal daydreaming.
Interesting about maladaptive daydreaming is that it actually isn't represented in the DMS handbook that psychologists often refer to in diagnosing patients. However, some professionals believe it is a mental disorder that can severely affect the individual.
I don't know why they put this as what's interesting. All disorders, before they were recognised once upon a time, were not in the official documentation. Just because it hadn't been documented yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist, or that it's different from what's in there currently.
What are the symptoms? People who experience maladaptive daydreaming often get triggered by real-life traumatizing events or mere reminders of them.
I would like to point out, although the word trigger is used a bit all over the place in the maladaptive daydreaming community, it doesn't just have to be to do with bad things that have happened in the actual sufferer's life. Like, I think Unique Souls did a video talking about the most like interesting or like common triggers for maladaptive daydreaming, and stuff like being bored or anything that reminds you of what happens in your kind of daydreaming universe. We call them paracosms. So it's not limited to just like negative things or harsh real life things.
They have very vivid, detailed daydreams that contain rich, imaginative plots.
So we do have very detailed daydreams, that's true, but they've again at this point left out that oftentimes we're not in full control of them, and sometimes really negative things happen in those daydreams that like really, like some people would even go so far as to say they've been traumatized by things that have happened in their daydreams, and it's not their choice to daydream about these things, it's just how it happens. And it's not like you can just choose to stop, because that need to daydream is still there, but every time you come back to the daydream this horrible thing is still happening, and it's kind of like it has to play itself out before you can move on to nicer things.
You might whisper during these daydreams, which can last for hours and affect your ability to finish tasks. You might have trouble sleeping at night too.
So they're right, you might whisper. You might act out on your daydreams. I know I gesture a lot, and like I was walking down the street literally about 5 minutes ago on a walk, telling someone who wasn't there to F off, which I got a few looks for, but it wasn't a choice, and I hadn't even noticed I'd begun to daydream. But again, they've left out the the most common type of daydreaming that a maladaptive daydreamer will do is daydreaming accompanied by music and repetitive movements. So again, for me it's pacing. We need to do this full kind of daydreaming to get like our fix, to feel like that need to daydream fulfilled. And Ellie Sommer did a good video on this, talking about like acting out. It's kind of like when you're actually dreaming, and that's why you're paralysed when you're asleep, so that you don't act out your dreams, like sleepwalkers and whatnot. That thing that paralyses you while you sleep isn't working properly, and that's why they'll get up and do things. It's kind of like that. Your brain is going through the motions, so you automatically do them in the real world as well. And the repetitive movement is a form, it's like a tool to help you concentrate, to induce a sort of like trance-like state that daydreaming evolves. Oh yeah, and it's worth mentioning as well, you might have trouble sleeping and can get in the way of other tasks. I feel like it's putting it kind of simply, because like when I was in school, my maladaptive daydreaming issue was the worst it got. Stuff like I would not stop to eat, I would not stop to go out to shower, like I said, I wouldn't stop to sleep. Even stuff like go to the toilet, like I would put it off, because any moment not spent daydreaming was a moment like wasted. Like it just, nothing was more important than daydreaming for me.
Maladaptive daydreaming can also coexist with other psychiatric problems, including ADD, OCD, and depression.
I want to correct the wording a bit there, because as far as I can tell, it's almost a requirement that you have something else that sort of fuels your maladaptive daydreaming, rather than can also. I don't think I've ever spoken to a maladaptive daydreamer who doesn't have some other form of disorder.
Is there treatment for it? Unfortunately, there is no known treatment for maladaptive daydreaming. However, there are techniques you can use to reduce the symptoms, such as avoiding potentially triggering people, places, and situations.
How do you expect us to do that? I get that earlier you suggested that the only things that trigger maladaptive daydreamers are things that would be triggering in terms of like old traumas, so at that point I get it. But as I explained, anything could be a trigger. Like literally anything. You watch a movie and some character behaves slightly like another character or says a phrase a character that you have says often, and you are triggered. You want to go daydream. I've seen this advice before from maladaptive daydreamers, and I just can't get behind it, because you physically could not avoid every single trigger possible for your maladaptive daydreaming. It's just, there's too many, it's not possible.
There is also medication one can take to manage their daydreams.
Like what? Because I've heard a lot of people talking about wanting to go on medication, and part of the problem with it not being recognised is that we do not know what helps yet. So do you mean you can go on medication to help the other disorder, which would make you want to daydream less, or just seems like that came from nowhere? So yeah, that was just generally the problems I had with this video. I'd like to point out, because I forgot to do it earlier, in fact I think I might take this clip and put it at the beginning, I'm not a mental health professional. I don't have a degree or anything like that. I just know what I've experienced from 10 years of having this disorder, and what everyone I've spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this, has told me they also experience. I'm not making this video to bash Psych2Go. I'm not saying it's a particularly bad video, it's just, it's oversimplified, and I'd like to see some more accurate representation of maladaptive daydreaming out there. I wouldn't say what's out there is harmful, it's just misleading, and can lead to a lot of confusion when trying to talk to other people who don't have it, because of the misconceptions it puts forward. Anyway, so yep, that was that. If you have any other corrections that you think I didn't mention, feel free to put them in the comments. I think that's all I had to say. So yeah, bye.